Our next topic is professional development, and if you have missed this, Rob announced a funding opportunity just a few minutes ago or an hour ago on professional development, so just giving you all a reminder again. This topic is very near and dear to me because at Instructional Research Group, our institute, several of our research efforts over the past 15 years have focused on improving teaching practice and student outcomes in reading and in mathematics. So without wasting much time, I will get this set up so we can get going. We have two very accomplished presenters here today who will share their insights on professional development. Our first presenter is John Woodward, with whom I've had the pleasure of working on the Problem-Solving Practice Guide, the IES Practice Guide. He is a distinguished professor emeritus and former dean of the School of Education at the University of Puget Sound. His area of research has been mathematics education for at-risk students in K-8. John has also developed intervention curricula and professional development services for K-8 mathematics. Our second presenter, Tim Jacobbe, did I get that right? You did. Okay. Is an associate professor of mathematics and statistics education at the University of Florida. His research focuses on the assessment and learning of statistics in grades 6 through 12 through the NSF-funded LOCUS project. Other areas of research Tim has explored include problem solving and professional development of teachers. So what we're going to do is John will talk for 10 minutes, then Tim will talk for 10 minutes, and we will do Q&A at the end. If you have any questions for John, please note them down. We will take them all together at the end. Okay? All set, John.
I don't know why 10 minutes is such a big deal, but I brought my own stopwatch. So here we go. And by the way, I tried to cram as many words into the title so I could get an extra 15 seconds for the presentation. So actually, let me begin by getting rid of the issue of how. In 10 minutes, the how of doing professional development, whether it's mentoring, coaching, professional learning communities, all those folks who kind of dwell in these subterranean caverns trying to connect these very black dots of causality between what they do and rises in teacher self-efficacy, in obviously teacher pedagogical content knowledge and content knowledge, much less student achievement. That's Sisyphusian work, and it's too long to talk about that, to compare it. So what I'm going to do, and this kind of frames and comes appropriately at the end of all these presentations, is talk in a very global way. I'm going to wear my dean's hat, or shall I say with great pleasure, my ex-dean's hat, and talk about the human capital dimensions of getting your ideas ultimately in some fashion into practice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 11 slides to make the case for the last slide. And one of the things that, to provide a kind of contemporary policy perspective, I'm going to break the division between pre-service education and in-service education. It is, in some worlds, in the language of, as it's expressed in the language, I should say, of teacher progressions. And again, the pre-service dimension speaks a lot to my past role as a dean of a school of education. When Russell asked me to do this, one of the things he had on his mind was the issue of policy. And so actually I thought I would start there. A couple years ago, I had a chance to work with the chief state schools officers and CEDAR on a discussion of what should be the expectations for special educators in the world of not only pre-service education, but what they would face going out into the teacher evaluation systems, the Danielson systems, those sorts of things, that they will face as, career educators. And without getting too far into the weeds, I should also say before I get further into this, I didn't have a hand in writing the final document. You can find it online. I was just part of one of those panels that, showed up for a couple of meetings, offered our ideas, and then it was distilled later. I thought I would talk about 3 of them. And these are sort of things I've squeezed out of there. In regard to what Karen and Lindsay were raising yesterday afternoon, the higher quality of pre-service education, one of the elements that comes out of this document is resemblant of all the other rhetoric that was coming out just even a couple of years ago, and that is to say, recruit in a much more rigorous way for teacher education programs, raise your entrance standards, make the curricular work far more relevant and rigorous, have better clinical experiences, raise the expectations for the outcomes, licensures, the EdTPA, that sort of thing if you're familiar with it, and then create turnkey employees that then find their way into a system and are prepared to hit the ground running. You could, in a more cynical way, translate that as be like Finland, be like Singapore, do the kinds of things they do as the McKinsey report in 2007 recommended. When you look at the recommendations for special educators, they are, and this is commensurate with what you find in the CEC recommendations for teacher licensure, what you see in the Danielson's frameworks, they are content neutral. And they start to speak to the fact, and this goes back to something that Karen Karp was mentioning yesterday morning about the lack of any experience with math education courses. Well, the observation that's made there, and then also is contained in this last bullet point, is that many special educators don't go into the world of special education teaching math. Some of them obviously don't even go in teaching at all. They manage IEPs. It's a very complex arena, so when you get the usual for special educators, the expectations are they're good at universal design, they do frequent assessments, they collaborate with teachers, they differentiate, they plan, they do those sorts of things, but there's no real mention even of reading or of mathematics education specifically. But the last element to me is one of the most interesting ones because it brings into the picture at high relief the issue of RTI. Who has the content knowledge? I mean, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is people with mathematical knowledge who have the eyeballs on kids, in our case, with disabilities who have those kinds of needs. Whether they're the regular classroom instruction, Doug was alluding to this just a moment ago, they're sort of placed for the most part in regular classroom environments. And if you look inside the standards, Toby King from Colorado, who was on the panel, if you go to Colorado and look at their standards, at Tier 1 in RTI, there is no expectation, at least very clearly, that special educators have any content knowledge. Again and again, the teacher is deemed to be the expert. And so where the expertise lies with the individual, the teacher, varies by where they are in the Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 systems. So what you have is the holy ground in the math education world and in the math special education world is the merger of these three different areas. The knowledge of students on the left is a proxy for those individuals who can differentiate and meet the needs of academically low achieving kids or kids in special education. Obviously, the world of content knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge is elements that have been around in math education for quite a while. We want a fusion of those three things. Well, here's a kind of prelude of what's to come, and it has a lot to do with the who. You're lucky if you can get 2 out of 3. From a teacher preparation point of view, we are chasing ghosts. You'll have special educators for the most part off to the side, and if you're lucky, you can get math educators with content knowledge that have anywhere close to kind of the pedagogical content knowledge we want to see to teach the standards in the world today. And another slide that I thought would be important for you to look at, and I want you to just sort of register what's on the left side. It's more than just that when we look at what make great teachers. In fact, look proportionately at the role of content knowledge vis-a-vis personality traits and dispositions on the left. Just take a few seconds. And one of the things I really love is fallibility, a reminder to all of us. But those elements are elements that are obviously critical to being successful in classrooms as well. Here's the problem. Since the recession, we've had a 35% decline in the number of people interested in education. There's been a commensurate decline even in TFA in terms of those who are entering education. UCLA has been giving surveys to entering freshmen for the last 50 years. The number of people interested in education is at an all-time low. And when you ask kids in 2014 on the ACT, if you're interested in education, only 5% say yes. You have, and we can call this the Linda Darling-Hammond world, a supply-demand issue. And what you have here is an excess supply over demand as a function of the recession. That happened, districts got poor, they couldn't hire, all kinds of people were interested. And you can see that as the economy's gotten better, things have changed, the projections for the future is a disconnect between how many people we need and how many people we have. Now here's the worst part of the story. In this conference, the two areas we are most concerned about are the two areas where it is hardest to recruit. Okay? And to make this problem even more exacerbated, if you can sort of take on Poseidon's trident turned upside down, look at the dark blue bars. Those are the STEM teachers. So the literature argues that among other things, these people are being drafted into the wider information economy, making them scarcer and scarcer for public education. I live in the Seattle area. I'll give it to you real crudely. Would you rather teach high school math or would you rather work for Amazon? It's a no-brainer. Plus the fact that when you enter the world of education, you are at a 23% wage disadvantage of your peers who have completed college education as well. And that doesn't take into account the quantitative areas. So at the bottom of the pile, special education, STEM education, the recruiting issues are what they are. In terms of, here we go. In terms of where these people are coming from, most are doing traditional IHE. Alternative education is growing, sometimes mandated by the state, but the story is problematic in this regard. You can see, and you can sum the numbers, 37% of special educators are getting their degrees from alternative forms of teacher certification. 20% in mathematics. That's almost 3 times the number in traditional IHEs. And here's the leaky bucket problem. The data suggests that those who follow traditional routes are much more likely to stay in education, at least in the context of special education, than those who do alternative routes. Now, we're better off than being a corrections officer, but there's a lot of roil after 6 years in teacher education, and it costs this country a ton of money. Approximately $2.4 billion a year to have teachers roll through the systems that they do. So here is my argument for the last slide, and I'm just amazed I'm at the 10-minute mark. If you can get them, you can find them. And this is nothing new in terms of what we've seen in the past. There are 3 things that we may want to consider in respect to professional development. One is to reconsider the man-machine, or human-machine, I should say, roles in teaching. I've had the good fortune in the last couple of years to interact with neuroscientists like Matthew Peterson, computer scientists, AI researchers like Zoran Popkovic at the University of Washington. They're developing systems that are a great leap forward than what we've seen in the past. I mean, I think this time is different, and they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but particularly in tier 2 types of circumstances, they don't get headaches, they don't get tired, and they don't retire. They can provide a backbone. And if you go back to those characteristics that I showed you of good teachers, this came up in Nicole's presentation the other day. Maybe we need people who are really good at motivating, at monitoring, at enhancing the experience of kids who are working under the authority of an expert, which happens to be a machine. This is a theme that's gone through the conference, and Rob addressed it even earlier just this morning. Ed brought it up. You need robust curriculum. Okay? You need a curricula that is standard-based. I've had the good fortune for the last few years to work with Asha Jatandra and her ratios and proportions curricula. It is standards-based. It's not this grist of old-style 1970s procedures and facts, and that's it. This is obviously the point that Barbara and Karen were making yesterday. And it's appropriate to do this in the context of NSF because they've been around this block before. Back in the 90s, they helped fund regular ed math curricula. It's something that, again, Ed brought up this morning. He's doing work in this area by himself to get research-based curricula out to the public. To have that in the hands, and there's something to be thought about in terms of the learning that teachers experience when they go through the curriculum itself. It's actually an extension of where Sharon was this morning. It's not just for the kids to enhance curriculum, but can you make those curricula available to teachers who don't know the subject themselves. Palinsar and Davis write about this in a recent Educational Researcher. And then the last piece, and we're just about there, right? Okay, 10 minutes. The last thing I'm going to say is this: it's narrowcasting. The idea in the math ed world, which I think is very illusory, is that you become this kind of doyen of math knowledge, that you are highly competent in all these areas, and it's the pedagogical knowledge and pedagogical content, et cetera, et cetera. For people who are going to be there for a relatively short period of time or have this collaborative role where they are not the expert, things like the RTI guide that Russell, Madhavi, and her colleagues put together provide a foundation for relatively narrow areas in the context of today's mathematics, where it's operations on whole numbers with conceptual development, whether it's rational numbers or problem solving. So that's an arena in which we can think about helping people do higher level tasks with low achieving kids, but not have to take on the all of mathematics education. 10 minutes? Okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, especially I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about statistics and data science because it's a new thing, actually. Statistics has been in the curriculum since '89, but we've seen an increase in focus on statistics and data science in the schools, and it's been incredibly exciting to see the interest increase among teachers, schools, and researchers. I don't know if any of you have seen, but the New York Times has recently launched a monthly feature column that will be saying what's going on in this graph. And I think this is showing the trend of the focus on data science in schools and in the world. And if we even think about what's going on in the world today, statistical literacy is crucial for social justice. That we need to understand data around us so we can make informed decisions as a society. Now, ideally, where would I like statistics to be in the curriculum? At the center of everything. And so statistics really could be the bridge of all these different disciplines. And this would be the ideal situation. This was proposed by Zelman Usiskin as one of the ways in which statistics could be introduced in the curriculum. And I think there are opportunities for interdisciplinary education that we are missing by not having statistics bridge across the different areas. Now, where is it in reality? It's within mathematics. And there are many people who feel like statistics takes the focus away from math, and that statistics really isn't math. But the issue is statistics is different than math, and that's actually why I started to call myself an associate professor of math and statistics education, just to emphasize there is a difference there. And here is the difference. And this was proposed by Moore and Cobb on the Shoulders of Giants in their chapter about what statistics is. The biggest thing is context. That in math, it's viewed that context obscures structure. But in statistics, context provides meaning. So you can't do statistics without context, which then presents additional issues if you think about students with learning disabilities. That there's a lot more reading involved in statistics than there usually is in mathematics. Not that there isn't reading in math, because here is a math problem. And this is, I use as an example to face the reality of the role testing plays. John talked about the issue of recruiting teachers. If we think about how teachers are treated, it's a really hard field to recruit people to go into. And especially when you focus on the assessments that they're asked to give to their students or that the state mandates. The way we evaluate teachers is different than any other field. And so we need to pay attention to the way we assess the disciplines that we are focused in. And one of the areas that I'm obviously focused on is the statistics assessments. This is categorized as a statistics assessment. Essentially what it is can I read a table and do a word problem? That's not statistics to the field of statistics education. So my goal was to try to change that because I knew the reality that if I don't change the way we assess it, I'm not going to change the way teachers teach it. So, thanks to the NSF, National Science Foundation, I'll put in another plug for the K12 program. Locus was funded through the K12 program, and the goal of this project was to change the way we assess statistics. And by doing that, it's been exciting to see. I really feel like we're starting to see ways in which teachers and schools are concerned about the way it's taught. And I don't believe that this could have happened if we didn't change the way it's assessed. Statistics is comprising about a quarter of the content standards on the SAT. And we have been in direct contact with the developers of it to work on trying to phrase the way they ask questions of statistics in context. So how do we change teachers? One thing I could do is I could throw theory at them. And guess what happens? They don't listen. And I don't blame them for listening, because when you're dealing with the chaos of students in your classroom, you want help and you want resources that help you. We also deal with the fact that in statistics, we have a stigma that you can say anything you want with statistics. And I'm not going to take the time to click on that link, but it's Homer Simpson basically telling us that 40% of statistics are made up. We know that this may be true, but the truth is statistics, and you can lie with statistics to anyone who doesn't understand statistics. So I help teachers understand that from this perspective. I want to rock their world. I want them to see what is different about statistics than what they may have seen. Because we always think of statistics as, here's a list of numbers. Can we find the mean, median, and mode? And my goal is to change that. So, for instance, I give them a copy of the Gettysburg Address, and this is just one example of an activity I do with teachers. I give them a copy of the Gettysburg Address, ask them to select representative words that they think is the typical word length, number of letters in a word. And this is based on actual data that I've had with teachers, where they collect a sample and they get it, and they do it based on what they think is representative. Their goal, they know, is to get the average number of letters. So, this is based on a random sample. It happens every single time. They always overestimate the sample and the sample mean. And when they see that, they begin to realize the role of bias in the way we collect our data. If we collect data in biased ways, or we don't report how we got our data, that's how we can say anything we want with statistics. And when teachers see this, they begin to listen. And they listen to wanting to change the way they teach. With reading, I think one thing that we suffer for in math education is the stigma that anytime anyone hears what I do for a living, they're proud to tell me they flunked algebra in high school. And I don't think people are as proud with the stigma of not being able to read. And so, unfortunately, we face that with mainly elementary teachers who might be scared to teach mathematics. But high school teachers are often very confident in the mathematics they teach. The difference with statistics, most people are willing to admit they don't understand statistics because it's new and new to the curriculum. So they're open to learning. So I think you're all or many of you are familiar with Notting's circle, and Randy Phillip expanded upon this work, the circles of caring. So at the heart of this is the way we change pre-service teachers is by getting them to focus on their care and love of children and use that to get them to care about learning mathematics. I do the same thing in professional development. And at the center of my circle are the teachers, that I care about them and my goal is to help them. And by caring about helping them with their practical problems, then I can hopefully make a difference in what they actually teach. Because statistics is a new discipline for teachers. It's brand new to the curriculum. It's the first time we've really had to teach it. And so my goal is to try to help them along the way. So this is a question from Locus. And here the question is, which of those grade levels vary the most? How many of you think it's grade 6? Grade 7? Grade 8? Grade 9? You don't care? All right. Not very many votes. I will tell you the answer, or you're scared. That's the other thing. The answer is grade 8. Oh, actually, it's not. It's grade 7. The most common wrong answer is grade 8. And the issue is because the common misconception is we look at the variation in the bars. And over 2,700 teachers have responded to this locus question, and about 50% get it correct. And that doubles what students get, which is about 25%. Correct. So I just asked you which ones vary the most. This is the actual question, and this explains how context is much more involved in statistics. This is from the Locus website, which has professional development with commentary for teachers to read. But if you look at this, this is what we have to do in statistics. We always have to say where we got our data from, or else we can't do anything about it. So the thing I always want teachers to understand is that we're all in this together. And if you're familiar with High School Musical or have any teenagers, that's where this comes from. I want teachers to know that we're all in this together, and I want us in this room to be in this together too, to help teachers work with struggling kids. Because the focus on learning disabilities has not been a priority or really existent in statistics education research. It's a new field. And so I'm asking you for help. If anyone's interested in collaborating, I am more than willing to talk to you, because there is a need for development of curricula, as John mentioned, so that way we can truly make change in classrooms. And we also need to have a focus on students with learning disabilities in statistics education research, because unfortunately it hasn't been there yet. We're just starting. So, any questions for either of us?
How you changed the assessments. How did your changes in the assessments kind of align with what you did in the professional learning? How is that, how do those pieces come together?
Okay, I don't know if I go here. Okay, so one of the biggest things, I mentioned that the way we traditionally assess statistics and have in curricula are we give a table and we call that a statistics item, or there's a list of numbers and can you find the mean, median, and mode? Statistics is really about variability. And so every question on the locus assessment deals with some aspect of variability. And so that is what we assessed in our item. So even if we're asking about the mean, it's not enough to ask about the mean. You need to account for variability in some way to make comparisons. And so whenever I do professional development with teachers, I emphasize the role of variability in stats. And I do that, and we did that as a team on the locus items as well.